Good evening, everyone. Well, before I call the meeting to order, I'd like to welcome council, staff members, and any else that are participating in a regular council meeting electronically for our Monday, April 20th. I'll read the order that constitutes this meeting, and that is Ministerial Order number M083, published March 26, 2020, under the provincial state of emergency declared on March 18, 2020, overrides the community charter and the council procedure bylaw for this meeting. Section 3 waives the requirement to allow members of the public to attend an open meeting, and Section 6 allows all or part of a meeting to be by means of electronic or other communication facilities. This order remains in place until the March 2020 state of emergency is rescinded. So on move to the regular council meeting is called to order, and I would like to discuss public input. Shall I read this, Mr. Corporate Officer?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have posted it in the Q&A window as well.
Okay, thank you. Item 2.1, due to the format of this meeting and the 60-second plus time delay on the broadcast, council is unable to accept real-time public input as part of this live meeting. However, the Q&A function of the electronic meetings have been activated. Up to 5 statements or questions may be submitted to be addressed later in this meeting. Only questions received by the time council reach the end of the agenda will be considered, which will be approximately 1 to 3 minutes before it is viewable by the public. Questions or statements will be reviewed by staff for appropriateness of language or subject matter. So we have that clear. Item number 3, I need a resolution that the agenda, including late additions and deletions, be adopted. Who will so move?
Councillor Weeb. And seconded by Councillor Leach.
And who's? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed?
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, I'll move to item 4.1, adoption of council meeting minutes. I need someone to move that the April 6, 2020 regular council meeting minutes be adopted as presented. Who will so move?
Councillor Weeb.
And who seconds?
Councillor Leach.
I'll call the question. Those in favor?
Motion carries.
Opposed to the nay? Great. Item 4.2, I seek someone to move that the April 2nd, 2020 committee of the whole meeting minutes be adopted as present. Who will so move?
Councillor Weeb.
Who seconds?
Councillor Leach.
Okay, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed?
Motion carries.
Thank you. I'll move to item 5, correspondence. Items appearing on the correspondence report to be debated must be removed by motion and considered separately. A resolution to remove an item that I to be correspondence discussed under new business of section 13 council meeting, regular council meeting. I need anybody to remove an item under 5.1 of correspondence.
Mr. Mayor, would you please mute your microphone? Councillor Hoffel, please stand by. You're alive?
Okay, can I just pull number 4, New Hazelton UBCM Resolution BC Gaming Grant, please?
Mr. Mayor, please stand by. Councillor Hoffel, please mute your microphone. You're alive?
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else need the removal of correspondence? There being none, then I'm asking someone to move the correspondence including in the staff report dated April 16th be received for information. Oh, no, sorry, that item number 4 be removed, and the number 4 is, oh, here we go. Where are we?
Mr. Mayor,
Got it. New Hazelton. It's a
UBCM.
It's a UBCM motion for BC Gaming Grants, and it be removed from the correspondence report for discussion under 13.1 new business.
Sorry, Mr.
So
Mayor.
moved.
Mr. Mayor, just a moment. That would be 13.2, please.
Okay, sorry, 13.2. Who move?
Councillor Leach,
Second.
Councillor Hopful,
Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed, if any?
motion carries.
Carries. Thank you. Okay. Now we have to move that the correspondence included in the staff report April 16 be received for information. Who will so move?
Councillor Hopful,
Second.
Councillor Leach,
Okay, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed?
motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 6.1, the financial statements. It's recommended that the District of Lillooet's 2019 financial statements be approved as presented in the staff report dated April 14th, 2020. Who will move?
Councillor Weeb,
Second.
Councillor Hopful.
Do we have discussion? And I neglected to ask if staff had something to clarify for us. I'm looking for discussion.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask Joni to unmute her microphone. If you would please mute yours.
Through the mayor, we actually have Taylor Turkington here from our auditors who's here to speak to the financial statements and answer any questions that council may have. If there's any further questions for staff, I can certainly answer those after.
Taylor, will you please unmute your microphone?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can, and you are live.
Awesome. All right, so let's get started. My name is Taylor Turkington from Bestwick Hildebrandt Lund CPA. We were formerly part of PwC, but PwC left Prince George, but our office stayed. So it's all the same people who've been working on it in the past are worked on again this year. And yeah, we'll just dive right in. I don't know if you have statements to follow along with, but on page 1, we have the management's responsibility for financial reporting. All this is a note stating that management is responsible for the presentation of the financial statements, and then mayor and council is responsible for the guidance of management. The next page, the independent auditors report. This is what the audit is for. This is where we give our opinion on the presentation of the financial statements. In our opinion, the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the District of Lillooet as at December 31st, 2019. So that just means it's a clean audit. We didn't find any issues with the financial statements. In the audit report, there is a couple notes. There's the comparative information note that's just saying last year was done by another auditor because it was done by PwC in the prior year. The responsibilities of management section just talks about that management is responsible again for the preparation and fair presentation of the statements in accordance with the Canadian Public Sector public sector accounting standards. And if you flip the page, we have the auditor's responsibilities for the audit of the financial statements. And this just goes over the responsibilities of us at BHL and what we did in regards to auditing the financial statements. And that's it for the audit report. If we switch or flip to page 5, this is the statement of financial position. So essentially the balance sheet. Cash increased by around $250,000. This is just due to the surplus through the year that we'll see in the next page. The investments, which are the MFA investment accounts, stayed relatively the same at $1.6 million. The accounts receivable went up about $140,000 to $631,000, and this is mostly due to an increase in the amount receivable from the BC municipalities. And then inventory stayed the same at around $26,000, resulting in a total financial assets of $8.3 million. For financial liabilities, the accounts payable and accrued liabilities increased about $130,000 to $449,000. This is a timing issue, as at the end of the prior year there was a large credit from the Minister of Finance, whereas this year we didn't have that, so that was a main reason for the increase. Employee feature benefits stayed pretty much the same at $94,000, and deferred revenue increased by about $100,000, and this is mostly due to an increase in citizens using the utility and property taxes prepayment plans. Restricted revenue stayed similar at $33,000, and long-term debt has decreased, and that is just due to paying off long-term debt, and there was no new debt entered into during the year. This results in total financial liabilities of $1.2 million and net financial assets of $7 million. Non-financial assets, prepaid expenses stayed pretty much the same at $22,000, and tangible capital assets went up slightly to $29 million, and this is due to the large purchases such as a fire truck or major paving, and then that was offset by the amortization of those assets. This results in an accumulated surplus of $36 million. We flip to page 6. This is the statement of operations, or the income statement. So for revenues, revenues have increased $300,000 to $6.1 million. This is due to a 2% increase in taxes, as shown as an increase in the taxation line at $2.5 million. The utility connection fees and user rates increased as well due to the rate bylaw increases. And the sale of services also increased a decent amount due to the more helicopter traffic in the area and more fuel sales at the airport. The remaining revenue items stayed relatively the same. For expenses, the total expenses are $5.7 million. This is up from the $5.5 million in the prior year. There's an increase in consultants used for the wildfire protection services, and there's some wage increases as well. This results in an excess revenue over expenses, or net income, of $326,000, resulting in our accumulated surplus, as mentioned before, at $36 million. Page 7 is the statement of changes in net financial assets. This just shows what made up the change in the net financial assets for the year, increasing from the 6.7 million last year to the 7 million this year. So there was the annual surplus we spoke about. There was $1.3 million in capital assets purchased. The large ones were the new fire truck purchase and the paving project. And then there was $1.3 million in amortization throughout the year, decreasing the amount. So that results altogether in net financial assets at the end of the year of $7 million. If you flip the page again to page 8, this is the statement of cash flows, and this describes all the cash inflows and outflows throughout the year. So the major items, there was the $1.3 million in the amortization expense, with the total cash flows from operating activities of $1.7 million increase. And then, as mentioned before, there was the $1.3 million for payments to acquire tangible capital assets. And so the total cash flows the total cash flows from capital activities resulted in $1.3 million going out. So the net cash increase for the year is $258,000. That's all for the face of the statements. The remaining pages are all just notes that provide more information for the statements. I know it might be difficult with this video, but I guess we can go over that still, or if Mayor and Council have any questions, it's up to you guys if you want to go through each of those.
Thank you, Mr. Turkington. That was riveting. Mayor Bussey, would you please unmute your microphone?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Target. Very riveting. Thank you. No, seriously though, it shows our health and very much appreciated, and thanks to staff to work with our auditors to create a report that we feel good about. Any questions, comments from council?
Councillor Hopflow, would you please stand by? And Mr. Turkington, you can unmute your microphone as well.
Okay, through the mayor. So can you just explain tangible capital assets, because they always sound really good, and I get that, like, my perception is like it is about the water treatment plant in itself and the sewer treatment plant, and you know but it just, you know, when you're talking about $30 million in tangible assets, I'd just like more of an explanation on that, if you could, please.
Okay, I'm just going to find the page here. Okay, so for tangible capital assets, if you go to page 18, it's a note 14, tangible capital assets, and so this will make it easier for me to explain probably. So this is just all the different types of. So do you mean like what makes it up, or how that number comes from? So you mean that 29 million? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I just want more of an explanation so everybody knows what exactly a tangible capital asset is, because some people just assume that, oh, we got $30 million and don't really understand what that means. So okay.
Okay, so the $30 million is the total cost of the capital assets that have been purchased less the accumulated amortization over the lifetime of the asset. And so what the accumulated amortization is instead of expensing the purchase of that asset all at once, that capital asset is, the purchase of it is expensed over the useful life of the asset. And the useful life of each asset is different for each type of asset. There's a list of the rates on page 11, but for example, park improvements could last anywhere from 15 to 25 years, depending on what the improvement is. Or roads, highways, and bridges are 15 to 95 years, again, depending on where the road is, what exactly was done to it. So what that line is saying, that 29 million, is just, it's the total cost of the assets less how much has been expensed, I guess is what it is. So the total cost for the assets that make up the 29 million was actually 47,600,000 is the total cost of the assets, but so far almost 20 million of that has been expensed.
Sorry, Mr. Turkington, I'm going to jump in here for a minute. Our CFO has something she would like to say.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think I understand what Lori's trying to ask. Sorry, Councillor Hopful's trying to ask. So tangible capital assets are things that we buy that cost a lot of money. They have to cost more than $5,000, and they have to last for a long time. So if we buy, say, a computer monitor, that's going to last for quite a long time, but it doesn't cost $5,000. So it's not going to be a tangible capital asset. So it has to meet both of those criteria. And I do have our TCA policy that I can send you that shows you exactly how long things have to last to be considered and how much they have to cost.
Thank you both.
Sorry, mine was much more long-winded.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from council? Mr. Mayor, would you please unmute your microphone?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tarkington. Thank you, Ms. LaRue. Now we'll call the question. Those in favor of receiving, please signify. Those opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Good, good. Thank you, folks. Thank you for your diligent hard work with regard to this, these statements and this audit, and very much appreciated. Thank you, staff. Okay, we'll move on to item 6.2. Before it's tabled, does staff have anything they wish to add to enlighten us on this UBCM and NDIT Housing Needs Report Grant application?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's pretty self-explanatory. The province is requiring that local governments complete a housing needs assessment, and both the UBCM and the Northern Development Initiative Trust have released funding streams that should cover 100% of the cost. So at the moment, with our grant writer, we are working on preparing those applications. The UBCM application was open and was supposed to close in May, but as with everything else, due to COVID, that has been postponed, but we are still planning on trekking ahead and making sure that we have that application ready on the shelf to go. So we're asking for council to give us these two resolutions so that we can jump on it when funding becomes available. And
okay, thank you very much. So I would like someone to move the staff recommendation for UBCM NDIT Housing Needs Assessment Report Grant application. I would like to get it moved and tabled as read. Is council okay with that?
Moved by Councillor Hopeful. Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
Seconded, please. Seconded, please.
By Councillor Leach.
Okay, thank you. And I'll call the question for item number 1 under this recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move to item 6.22. And that I want someone to move to table this as is read. Who will so move?
Mr. Mayor, if I may interject here for a moment. For these finance plan and utility bylaws, I would like to request that any questions of staff be asked before a motion is tabled in case there need to be any changes to any resolutions.
Okay, so duly noted. I thought I did that, but maybe I'm not the tangible asset that I thought I would be. Good. Any input from staff before we move to item number 2 on the housing needs report motion? Okay, I hear nothing. So who will so move item number 2 as read? 6.22 as read. Who will? And who seconds?
Councillor Hopeful.
And I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed?
Motion carries.
Thank you, Council. I'll now move to item 7.1, financial plan bylaw. Could staff please enlighten us before we table these?
Joni, would you please unmute your microphone?
Sorry, through the mayor, I believe that our CAO was going to speak to it first.
You got me there on there, Kevin?
CAO, you may start while the video catches up.
All right, thank you. So I just wanted to let council know that the financial plan bylaw that you're seeing in this agenda is what we have to go with for now, because this is all the time we have as the deadlines are quickly approaching. It's a bit late in the game to be making any significant changes to this bylaw, but staff are very aware of the financial situation that we find ourselves in because of decreased revenues. We're already seeing decreased revenues right now. So what we're proposing is that staff last week went through all the increases that were proposed to the budget, both capital and operating, and just all the projects that were being planned for 2020. And we red circled all the items that we as staff feel can be delayed until either later this year when the situation changes or even into 2021. So at this point, it's a bit late to change the bylaw, but rest assured we will go over the items next that staff feel can be deferred. And then because no one knows how long this is going to last, we undoubtedly will be bringing back the budget, the 2020 budget, to council as the situation unfolds and proposing amendments to it based on that. So it could be a couple of months, it could be in the fall. We'll be conversing monthly as part of our council meetings, how we're seeing things progress. And if we see any major changes, we'll bring back an amendment at that time. So the items that Joni will speak through pretty briefly, feel free to discuss, and we will talk to you about them as we go through them.
Thank you, CFO. Please stand by.
Through the mayor, I'll try and keep this fairly short and sweet. The financial plan bylaw that, as our CAO said, is showing in the agenda that's up for consideration by council, includes everything that we've discussed so far. So it includes a 0% increase to the property tax revenue over 2019's revenue, 0% increase in utility rates, which is just the water and sewer over 2019. The new exempt position that was requested by council. However, this would be funded through our accumulated surplus in 2020, so not to affect our taxpayers in 2020. The base operating budget is still the same as what council has seen from the beginning, from February 13th of the beginning of all these meetings. Hard to believe it's only a couple of months ago. And all of the projects that council has seen in the project listings and has tentatively supported to this time are included in the budget. As our CAO mentioned, all of management have sat down a couple of times and gone through and tried to seriously consider what projects can be deferred without adding any risk to the district, which is our biggest concern. If deferring a project would add risk to us, and which projects, hopefully, if the situation changes sooner than later, could still be considered towards, as our CAO said, maybe late summer, early fall this year. So again, those are all included in the financial plan bylaw. Staff has gone through, and even without the projects, just the operating budget, we've also gone through and tried to determine ways that we can save operating funds. So obviously most conferences and training has been cancelled because of the distancing, social distancing. So obviously there's going to be a lot less travel and training that staff will be doing this year, and they're asked to consider, even should the situation change, if it's not something that's required for a designation or a certification that they have, perhaps it's something that can wait until next year. So there's travel and training. We're hoping to reduce our postage costs even by putting taxes and utilities together and mailing them out at the same time. So I just want to assure council and the public that staff is very cognizant of trying to be very creative in ways that we can save money this year. So I don't really have a lot else to say to this. I can't figure out, I'm going to try and share my screen with you, which shows the projects that staff considers could be deferred until later in the year or even next year. So I'm going to try and share that with you. And if anybody could let me know if you could see that.
Thank you, CFO. It is live.
Thank you. So you can see on this list the video recording software and equipment. Obviously, we seem to be doing okay right now, so that's definitely something that can be, if not deferred, even cancelled. Councillor Leach has confirmed that the Memorial Garden improvement and the Miyazaki House security can be deferred. The contaminated sites assessment, that's sort of, the title of it doesn't really tell you what it actually is. That's a transfer into reserve for future liabilities that we may have in recording contaminated sites. So that was just to try and build up a reserve to mitigate some of the expenses in the future. That can be deferred. The official community plan, our planner has suggested that that can be deferred. You can see a number of different projects here on this listing, just about $450,000 worth of projects that staff believes can be deferred or put off right until next year, if not canceled altogether. So again, so that council is aware, we are certainly making big efforts to save money throughout this year, recognizing the limited revenues that we're likely going to have. One other thing, there was an announcement through the provincial government. They have allowed us until the end of this year to remit the school tax payments, which is the biggest portion of what we collect on our property taxes for another authority that we have to collect and then submit to them. That was a big worry for me in delaying the tax due date, because we would still have to remit those funds. Last year was about $1.6 million. We would have to remit those funds prior to the due date of our property taxes. So this was, in my opinion, one of the most beneficial announcements that they made for local governments in allowing us until December 31st to remit those payments. So again, that was quite a load off my mind. They did also announce that for industrial classes, there's 3 classes of properties. The province has declared the due date for property taxes to be, penalties would be imposed on October 1st for those classes of properties. So council has previously recommended that we extend the due date for property taxes and utilities to September 15th. Staff is now recommending that we extend that to September 30th so that all classes are able to benefit from that extension that's been granted by the provincial government for the industrial classes. That won't affect anything that we're looking at tonight. That would come into play when we look at the tax rate bylaw. And with that, I will pass it back over to the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Please unmute your microphone.
Thank you, Ms. LaRue. If I could ask, then, if council has concerns and areas they would like to see red circled as well, we can discuss that now correctly. But if we approve this, is it based on a trust thing, or how do we handle that from a legal point of view, Mr. Corporate Officer? I mean, the reason I'm saying is we want to look at what some of the projects are through our stabilization reserve. And the other thing is a few on Schedule A that some of the councillors may want to discuss as well. So,
would the CFO like to address any of that?
Through the mayor, certainly. What we are looking for absolutely is items that council wants to, redline and put off, basically. What this would mean is I'll be recording those changes to the budget, and we will bring back an amended financial plan to council with those changes in place. If it's just a matter of deferring something until later in the year when hopefully the situation is better, then that's not something that we should remove from the budget at this time. It would be something that would be flagged by staff to discuss with council again when the situation changes, and we may be looking at going ahead with that project that was deferred.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Weave has a question. May I go to her? Councillor Weed, please stand by. You are live.
Yes, Joni, I was wondering if you could email council a copy of what you had on your screen there. I've got some of them marked off, but I didn't get them all. So if you could do that, that would be greatly appreciated.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Weeb. Thank you, Councillor Weeb, and thank you, Ms. LaRue. Does the rest of council understand that? So from what I'm gathering here is that we can approve this, and it's a type of subject to in terms of red circling things for postponement, rather than items to be taken out permanently. Am I correct in that assumption?
CFO, you're live.
Through the mayor, yes, that's correct. Our hope is that the situation is going to improve and that we will be able to go ahead with a lot of these things, but we just don't know.
Mr. Mayor, you are live.
Thank you, Ms. LaRue. I want input from the rest of council because there are a few things I think that we can postpone and hold, and as long as it's a proviso in terms of subject to, I'd like to see that, say, appropriate from a procedural point of view, but I'd like the rest of council to have input at this time.
Councillor Hopful, please stand by.
Hi, I didn't get to see, I agree with Barbara, I didn't get to see the list long enough to make a comment on it. You're really quick, Joni. I did get a few things, but are we going to be able to come back to this? Like if we decide that we want to red circle something and then, I don't know, at a later date, just decide a month from now that, you know what, we really don't even need to say the video equipment or whatever. We can do it then too, can we not?
Go ahead, CFO.
Through the mayor, this sounds like we're doing something completely different. And just to be clear, the financial plan can be amended at any time, regardless of this situation that's here right now. We've had a number of financial plans come back to council as amendments closer to the end of the year as we find out that, you know, there were unexpected costs or we were able to save some money here to offset here. So although it sounds like this is because of the COVID-19, it's not entirely because of the pandemic. This is something that actually happens every year. We just don't want council to be leery is the best word I can come up with right now, of adopting a budget and thinking that that budget is now set in stone and we're going to spend whatever is laid out in that budget, regardless of the fact that we've lost a huge amount of our revenues this year. So we just don't want council to be worried about that, which is where we're saying we're already looking at ways that we can save money. This would be if there's things that council wants to remove entirely from the budget, that would be, and sorry, I may have the numbers of these wrong, but you have introduction and first reading, and then you tell me what you want taken out, which is now an amendment to the resolution. So it would go into the financial plan prior to its adoption.
Councillor Hopful, do you have a follow-up?
Nope, that's good. Thank you.
Does anyone else from Councillor Weeb please stand by? Go ahead.
Yes, through the mayor to our CFO, I'm just curious, we've gone through a little list there of projects. What about the expenses, like on the financial plan bylaw? Are we going to be addressing some of those? Or is that going to happen at a later date? Or can I kind of bring a couple of things up now?
Go ahead.
Through the mayor, you can certainly bring some things up now. There are a number of things that staff, as I mentioned earlier, is already aware of and looking to reduce the expenses on. Like I say, no unnecessary travel and training or conference costs. We won't be having summer students this year unless we get the 100% grant funding, which is a benefit that's being offered this year through the Canada Summer Jobs Program. We're looking at, we've had some employees request voluntary layoffs. We're looking at having, encouraging our employees to use some vacation time now while facilities are closed, so we aren't in a position later in the year of having to pay it out. So we certainly are already looking at all of these different ways that we can save on our expenses. But if council has suggestions, absolutely, we're open to them.
Councillor Weed, you have a follow-up?
Well, I do. I did get an email, and I have discussed with the board of the Miyazaki House, and then I'm going to include the museum in that, because I think it's totally irresponsible for any of us to think that we're going to be open throughout the summer or going to be bombarded with tourists. So I'm thinking that's a fair-sized expense, plus the campground's closed, so that's kind of whatever. And I'm kind of wondering about the rec center as well, like it's closed. Yeah, I just kind of going through the expense thing there, I could come up with a few of them. So I'm just kind of wondering how the rest of council feels about that.
Mayor Bussey, please unmute your microphone.
Thank you, and thanks for the input so far from council. I think to coin it in a simple term from what I'm gleaning out of this thing is we want to conserve cash flow. And I think once you hear my report coming up, and especially the CAO's report coming up, you can see that farther on in the agenda, we're looking at a anticipation borrowing bylaw. The thing is that, and it's not for free, it's not interest free. So the more cash, this is me speaking, the more cash we can conserve now, the less of an anticipated borrow we need. And I think we should look at it with a very eagle eye. And I know councilors have some good ideas, but basically that's where I feel it. The CAO is almost every day with the province and the emergency center, and not from my interpretation, and I'll let him talk to it in his report, getting a whole heck of a lot of support like we think we are politically. And I'll wait for my report in terms of the weekly Thursday meeting we have with municipal affairs and housing. And the factor, as the various small municipalities are saying, are we going to get relief or support? There's a lot of, we're working on it. So I think it's prudent that council really looks at this with an eagle eye, and I think we should red circle as much as we can with staff's input in terms of conserving our cash flow and then releasing when the times are right and we feel what we can afford to. Because I feel, just as an example, you know, one of our projects funded through the stabilization reserve, increasing bylaw office hour, I think we should hold that. And I don't think I saw that up on the chart that our CFO put up there. Another thing on Schedule A, I mean, we've got obviously, you know, donations and so on. Oh, that's the revenue side. Yeah, we don't want to stop that. Okay. But on the expenses side, yeah, a good point is museum and Miyazaki House, and there are other ones as well. I think we've got to put a hold on these issues until we see what we're up against and looking against, and see exactly what the province is going to come to us with. and it's lobbied daily by our CAO and lobbied weekly by conserving cash flow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The CFO would like to jump in, and then Councillor Leach has been trying to get in for a while. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the mayor, just to be clear, and I did just email that list to all of council. The increasing the bylaw officer time is one of the projects that we are recommending be at least deferred. As well, the projects that were listed in my staff report, the Fire Smart planning initiatives and the community emergency alerting system. The Fire Smart planning initiatives is another one that's on that list, recommended to be deferred. The community emergency alerting system is already in progress, so that's not one that could be deferred, but we'll probably be able to realize enough savings in expenses to not have to utilize that stabilization reserve for that small $1,400.
Thank you. Councillor Leach, please stand by. Go ahead.
All right. Hello. So looking at page 126, the attachment 2, projects listing in our report there, some things that I think that could possibly just be taken right out and not deferred for this year is the vehicle replacement at $50,000 and the pool painting and the pool vacuum combined at about $30,000. Our Director of Recreation, Mr. Gare, and I have discussed with Swims that we will not be opening the pool this season based on still on staffing, but due to the COVID situation, staffing's become even harder. So that's something that we can pull, I believe. Anyway, just some thoughts from us to council will be welcome. Thanks.
CFO, do you have, CAO, please stand by. Go ahead.
Hi, those 3 items, I can confirm for you that staff have actually decided that those 2 will not happen this year. They're not critical. Some things are being deferred for obvious reasons, others are just being nixed completely, and they'll come back as changes in an amended budget in the future.
Councillor Hopful, please stand by.
Through the mayor, Joni, with regard to the museum, did they already get the funding from, I think it's Destination BC? Did they already get the funding for this year? It's based on last year, I believe.
CFO, go ahead.
Through the mayor, unfortunately, I have no way of knowing what funding they've received from other parties. They have not received any funding from us so far this year.
Mayor Bussey, please stand by.
Okay, so like I agree with what Barb was saying, or Councillor Weed was saying. Sorry?
Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Hopful.
Okay, I was just saying I agree with what Councillor Weed was saying, and I think as you know, we as a mayor and council, we need to follow the guidelines of the provincial and federal and the World Health Organization. Last Friday, Bonnie Henry stated that the current restrictions would remain in effect for some time, and today she stated that our new normal is going to be a modification of the things that we currently have in place. So I think that when our new normal comes, then we can look at prorated funding for places like the museum. But have we deemed them to close already? Like, have we taken that step and said the museum is not open until further notice?
CFO or CAO, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, I can speak. So, am I live?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yes, so staff have reached out to the museum and information center, Tourist Information Center, and advised them that council has the option to not fund them this year. There is no contract in place for their operations, so they are asking each year, it is discretionary each year, whether or not council provides them the funds. And they are currently closed, and we don't know if they're going to be able to open this year. So again, at this point, the expectation from them should be that there's no guarantee of funding, as they're not open right now and are unlikely to do so this summer. If it changes, we'll of course bring it back to council.
Thank you, Councillor Hopful. The mayor has been attempting to interject. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, folks. Just as a point of clarification, the visitor center funding comes after the letter of to the BC Destinations comes from the District of Lillooet, which would have been last November. Obviously, going through some interim people at that time, so it's unknown unless the staff present knows that that letter was submitted from the district decides where the visitor center funding goes, and it would have been last November. And if the district said museum or the Historical Society, then they will receive the funding. Thanks.
Are there any other questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Hopful, please stand by. Go ahead.
So I would like to leave it open for all of our museum and our Miyazaki House and the rec center, again, to maybe do a prorated funding to open when our situation changes, if that should happen. Would that be acceptable?
If I may, yes, the budget, as we say, the budget is already containing those expected costs as though this situation weren't happening. So yeah, we are playing it by ear on a week by week and month by month basis, just much like the campground right now. It's not open, so the expenses match what we're expecting from revenue, which is nothing right now. So same with museum and so forth, is that they're closed, they're not being paid, but it is budgeted for. So if things change, it's in the budget.
Thank you.
Anything else from council? Mr. Mayor, please unmute your microphone.
Thank you. Okay, I've got a question for staff in terms of, is this wording sufficient? Something inside my gut tells me there should be a bit of a proviso. In other words, yeah, we can approve this, but it's subject to, or am I being too?
CAO, if you could please unmute your microphone.
Yes. So no, there's no requirement to add anything in writing. As Joni said, the CFO said, this is pretty actually typical that we budget for an ideal year. And I don't think I've ever had an ideal year in my life. So there will always be things that just don't happen and adjustments that have to occur because of the things that happen during the year that we just can't predict, which is why it's pretty common every year to have amendments to the budget. Do note as well that this entire meeting is being recorded for posterity. So if there's any question as to what staff are spending money on, you can go back and watch this and say we promised not to spend money willy-nilly.
Council, Mr. Mayor, please unmute.
Okay, thank you. So in other words, we're supposed to trust you.
Yes, please.
Listen, we're in we're in unique times. We have unique scenarios, a unique situation. I take your point in terms of the being videotaped, but somehow the public has got to know, yes, we are approving this circled items depending and staff coming back to council at an appropriate time in order to release the funds, and we must do everything we can to conserve our cash flow until we're able to achieve the levels of revenue that we hope for, and probably without the support of the province or the feds. We'll see. Am I correct in my assumption?
If I may, yes, if I can put it this way, staff have a legal obligation to keep us in a good financial state. It's written right into the community charter of the responsibility of the CAO and especially the chief financial officer to manage money wisely for the municipality. So in any year, regardless of events like this, we have a legal obligation to make sure that we're not spending money that we can't afford to spend. So whether it's COVID and a couple months delay of expenses, or it's just any other year where something comes up, we can't be spending money unwisely. That's an obligation on us. It's a personal and professional responsibility.
Go ahead, Mr.
Thank
Mayor.
you. But I still feel it's worthy of note that the public be officially informed that despite approving the plan, there are extenuating circumstances in which our staff will monitor. Although it's like I say, it's an annual type thing. This is unique, and I feel there has to be a uniqueness in terms of how we inform the residents of the public in terms of how we will be dealing with this financial plan. But I'm one of council. How do the rest feel?
Does anyone from council have a comment? No one from council has indicated, Mr. Mayor. But the CAO would like to contribute. Go ahead.
If I may, one of the options to put this on record even more firmly is the document that was sent out, emailed by the CFO during this meeting, could be added to the minutes and could be added as a note to the financial plan just for record purposes, so that the public and council and staff are all well aware of these things that we redlined, so that there's a clear written record of these items will be looked at and questioned and brought back to council if there's any changes to them.
Councillor Hopful, please stand by.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yes, I'm in agreement. I think that this is a good idea, and you know, we do have a duty to protect the community, and we're just going to do what we can to promise the community everything that we've already promised. But due to the situation, I think it would be irresponsible for us to encourage, you know, tourists to come to our community at this time, but it's not like we're going to forget that. So I think that everything that Mayor Bussey has said, I completely agree with, and I think that it's a really good option to put it in the minutes. Thanks.
CFO, please stand by. Go ahead.
And just to confirm with council, on that listing, I did not have the Miyazaki House or the museum funding. I will add those to that list of items to be deferred.
Mr. Mayor, please stand by. Go ahead.
Okay, if council is in agreement, let's add those and let's attach it to the minutes, and then we have a document that covers staff and covers us, and then informs the public that we're concerned through these extenuating times and circumstances. So therefore, Mr. Corporate Office, I'm I am comfortable then in terms of tabling the, am I safe with that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if you wish, you may move all three as written.
Okay, thank you. I'd like someone to move item 7.1, items 1, 2, and 3 as written. Who will so move?
Councillor Wiebe.
Who seconds?
Councillor Leach.
Okay, last time to comment before I call the question. Calling the question, those in favor? Opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Thank you. Move on to item, and all I can say is before we get into table into recommendations, gonna hear from staff, please.
CFO, go ahead.
Through the mayor, although if you look at the staff recommendation and all of the resolutions that are in there, it looks like a crazy thing. This is, we have to amend we have 3 bylaws, 2 water bylaws, 1 sewer bylaw. We have to amend all 3 of those bylaws in order to reflect the 0% increase in utilities, so that the utility rates in 2020 will be the same as the utility rates in 2019.
Mr. Mayor, please unmute.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. So I'd like to then have these read and broken down into 3 so that we deal with each one of these recommendations at the same time, because we're going through the readings as well as the adoption. So can I have someone that 2 utility bylaw amendment items 1, 2, and 3 as read? Who will move, please?
Councillor Howe.
Second.
Councillor Hopful.
Okay. Call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Okay. Thank you, Council. Now we'll deal with recommendation items on 7.2 utility bylaw amendment, items 4, 5, and 6 as read. Who will move? Sorry.
Councillor Hopful.
And second.
Councillor Wiebe.
Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Thank you, Council. We'll, under the same 7.2 utility bylaw amendment, I'd like someone to move that items 7, 8, and 9 as read. Who will so move?
Councillor Howe.
And who seconds?
Councillor Wiebe.
And I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Thank you. 7.3, before we table, could I have, now this is what I alluded to while we were going over our financial plan bylaw, and it's something I think that's prudent and appropriate for staff to do. So if staff could enlighten council, please. Item 7.3, revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw.
CFO, go ahead.
Of course, through the mayor. This was more important before the provincial announcement of delaying the school tax remittance until the end of the year. However, even saying that, as you'd see in the staff report that's attached to the bylaw, we don't have an intention of using this, of borrowing money. However, it's been recommended by a number of lawyers as well as the UBCM that municipalities have this bylaw in place should our cash flow situation get to the point where we have remittances or payments that we need to make and we have not received our inflows of cash, whether it be from property tax, utilities. Those are our biggest revenue sources. So again, there's not an intention to take advantage of this borrowing, just to have it in place should the need arise. It would still come back to council prior to actually borrowing, should that come into play. And the amount that's listed in the bylaw itself, up to $3 million. So we're under this revenue anticipation borrowing, we're allowed to borrow up to 75% of our prior year's property tax revenues. That was $3.1 million is the 75%. This $3 million, even should the need arise to take advantage of this revenue anticipation borrowing, we have no requirement to borrow that full $3 million. Perhaps we needed $100,000 to make our remittance to the regional district. We were just short a little bit of cash in the couple of days between the remittance due date and the tax due date. So there's no requirement to borrow the entire amount. You can borrow as needed. It acts as a line of credit, so you could borrow $100,000 one week. You have another remittance comes due the next week. You can borrow again. You just can't borrow any higher than that $3 million. So this is more of a just in case, so that we have this in place prior to actually needing it, because we would have to potentially go through 2 council meetings to get this bylaw adopted further in the future should this situation change. And the other concern is that we are a very relatively small municipality. Our revenues compared to a lot of the bigger cities, and I hate to compare us to Vancouver or Kelowna or anything like that, are a lot smaller. They're looking at these same bylaws, only their 75% borrowing is more like $13 million or $31 million. And the MFA may only have so much borrowing power. So the sooner that we can get this to the MFA and they have an idea of how many municipalities may have to take advantage of this, the longer period of time that they have to get their ducks in a row to ensure that they have the funds available to offer this to all the municipalities. So again, not something we're looking at having to take advantage of. We just would recommend that it be in place should the need arise.
Mr. Mayor, please unmute.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. LaRue. Comments, concerns from council?
Nothing indicated, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So I'll ask a mover, can I do all 3, Mr. Corporate Officer?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, all 3 can be considered simultaneously.
Read. Okay. Item 7.3, revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw. I need someone to move staff recommendation items 1, 2, and 3 as read. Who will so move?
Councillor Howe,
And who seconds?
Councillor Leach,
Okay. And I'll call the question. Those opposed, if any?
motion carries.
Okay. Thank you, Council. Go to item 8, the work in progress will be updated next month. Item 9, there will be no notice of motion. We'll go to 10, report from the mayor. As I mentioned in our financial plan, basically it's pretty quiet, except that every Thursday, all the mayors of the certain regional districts, as well as the CAOs, are on a teleconference call with Minister Robinson, usually the parliamentarian, and the regional district board chairs. Basically, it's an opportunity where we listen to what the province is updating us in terms of what they're prepared to do, in terms of assistance, and also what we are required to do according to the regulation. Last Thursday were a lot of updates and questions which usually are held during the latter part of the meeting from each one of the mayors or the CAOs and regional district chairs was put on hold because there was a lot of discussion by the ministers. And the CAO usually sends these email questions in, and we receive a reply. Usually we're working on it. In the last Thursday, basically they brought us up to date on rent supplements in terms of amount of money, $300 single, $500 for couples. They also announced mental health, $5 million for new services, and looking at support for post-secondary students. BC Housing was looking at for spaces for the homeless, and they're looking at relaxing overnight camping rules to support the homeless and flexibility. They're asking us to be flexible about parking bylaws, etc. Travel, the nation has to be followed in terms of in-country, and I think across province, but I'm not quite sure that. I think it was just international at the time. Recreation by the conservation officers, and they're looking at temporary workers, of which in BC are 10,000 a year, believe it or not, and having to self-isolate when they come in to the province for the farms and the like. The most important one last Thursday was the property tax framework. And there were new tools which they wanted to roll out, and I think our CFO has addressed one portion of it, where we're supposed to work together. This meeting, of course, is 189 of its local governments, and they want to assist the local government and discussions through municipal finance. As our CAO will probably tell you, until we see the green stuff, it's all talk so far. So I'm really happy that council and staff are prudent enough to prepare for conserving our cash flow. The property tax framework, the business sector, July, that no penalty if they are late to October, I think, which CFO mentioned. And they're also looking at a further reduction in terms of school tax for them of 25%. For the local side, December 2020 is a hold on school tax, but we have to pay the others, such as to the regional district and hospital, as our CFO says. And I'll reserve comment there. The borrow interest free from that 5 years to pay back to ensure that vehicle services are kept and up to the amount of needed, and our CFO mentioned that. And use reserves. So obviously show showing us a lot of how we should do with the stuff, with the revenue and resources we have, and we're still waiting for an opportunity to glean some from Victoria. Municipal property tax sale date, the delay date, extra year for delaying tax, deferrals, and the annual delayed until August. No penalties for delays. And seniors and families with children can defer the property tax. So that's basically what was happened last Thursday. And the only other issue that I've been dealing with, obviously, is Aspen Planers, and I was informed by their executive director that last Thursday, I think, that the Aspen Planers started up one basis, and Savinaw started up on Saturday to take product, and basically there's also started up the Savinaw plant. And essentially what it is, and you can tell, is that it then qualifies them for the federal grant scenario, and also to create a cash flow in case further and longer shutdowns are come versus having the product sitting in the yard. So that's the latest that I've got from Aspen Planers. And finally, bear with me, I want to read an information release that we, the council and District of Lillooet staff, responds to the criminal activity in our community. And I'll read this out, and it will be posted online. It has been reported these past number of weeks, and horribly even now during these difficult, when the community is facing the additional challenge of dealing with COVID-19, that Lillooet is experiencing an increasing number of break-ins and thefts of property. Any form of theft, regardless of the motivation, is not acceptable. I know I speak for all of council when I say we are deeply disturbed and troubled by this spat of criminality that we in Lillooet are experiencing. It's important that the residents and businesses of Lillooet are aware that we, the council, finds this continuing behavior intolerable, and the district is working with the RCMP to stifle this deplorable behavior. We are thanking RCMP for making some recent arrests in response to these incidents, but there's still a lot more that we feel can be done. We ask that everyone directly report these incidents to the RCMP so that they can investigate and take action. This also ensures that the local detachment has to report these statistics up the line to get increased resources to address them. Council will continue to work with the RCMP and tribal police until this behavior ceases. In conjunction with these efforts, we intend to review and revise our district bylaws and our bylaw enforcement policy to address concerns of residents that we contribute to this increased climate of criminality. Our community must not allow the acceptance of this criminal behavior, and we are committed to tackling this systemic problem. Everyone has the right to live in our own home. We all deserve to enjoy our personal property, which we all work so hard to earn. Our homes in this community are our sanctuary, and we must not allow criminals to ruin it. We resolve as a council and staff to work with our CMP to end this. Thank you. That is.
Councillor Hopfull, please stand by. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. April 6th, the regular council meeting and the closed meeting, and virtually, that's all I really have. But I would like to add that throughout the last week, I have to thank all you guys, the staff, Jeremy, Kevin, for aiding and teaching me to use this virtual program of Teams and from home, because I was going into the district. And to Mayor Bussey for lending me the camera, because evidently there is not a camera to be bought in Canada with all this virtual going on. I went down to virtual help, and yeah, they had nothing. So anyways, I just wanted to thank everybody for helping me get up and running here. And Joni, great job that you're doing with the finances too. And also, I just wanted to say that since the beginning of COVID-19, on a daily basis, I receive multiple updates to our changing world from the district. That EOC information fact sheet is really great. I appreciate it. From the SLRD, the Interior Health, BC Housing, a lot of what Mayor Bussey has shared, you know, via all of the emails and the web links. I've listened to a ton of them, and it's pretty impressive how we can get this information out from, I'm sure that every 3-year-old to 103-year-old knows exactly what's going on and what to look for. So again, I just really appreciate it. Thanks. That's all for me.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Please stand by. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I apologize, first of all, for the challenges with with logging in for tonight. My computer decided just before the meeting to not work for me, even though I was doing fine at 5 p.m. So thank you for your patience. First, I would like to say thank you to Mrs. LaRue and team for an excellent job well done with our year-end budget. I was reading through the comments from the auditors, and you guys nailed it. And I'm really proud of you, and I'm proud to be a part of this team. As for what I've been up to this week, or since the last meeting, there has been and every week actually, a Chamber of Commerce board meeting. So sort of a behind the scenes get together outside of their usual Thursday meetings. And I'm not too sure if I can share some of this information. So tell you what, I'm going to just double check this information with the board and find out of which I can share next meeting, just to keep everyone in the loop. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leach. Please stand by. Go ahead.
All right. Yeah, so mine sounds pretty similar. I have been focusing a lot on my family and trying to get us prepared for potential things that come up in the future. I've been keeping up to date with all of the releases that have been coming from both the district, the SLRD, from the province and federally. One particular one that I wanted to point out that I was actually quite pleased that Lillooet has actually been included, because in the years past, I know that Lillooet on the Sea to Sky corridor has been neglected, but the SLRD has actually put out a Feed the Need campaign online, and they have a direct link to all of the community food banks. So if people wanted to go on and donate funds to a specific food bank, you can go on to their website, and you can scroll down and click the Lillooet Food Bank button, and funds can go directly to that. Or they also have a button on there that says put the funds where it's most needed. So whether it's Lillooet or Pemberton or Squamish, Whistler, whatever needs it the most and has the most traffic, the funds can go there as well. So I thought that was really nice to see. I had the pleasure of welcoming our new Public Works Director to town last night. We gave him our yard at our rental because there's nobody there, and I'm enthusiastic to welcome him to the team and his family to town. I think they're going to fit in really, really nicely here. I did have one question to Mayor Bussey, because I just didn't catch it because you were cutting out a little bit on my end. But your statement for the criminal activity, did you say that you were going to have that posted online for us to send out or for people to read as well?
Go ahead and unmute, Mayor Bussey. Yeah.
Yeah, that will be, our CAO we'll carry it forward, and I'll check, Jeremy, we can post that online, or it'll be on our Facebook, correct?
Yes, we're going to post it on our website, Facebook, Twitter, and it will be included in the meeting minutes.
Awesome, thank you. Other than that, thank you to our staff. You guys have been doing a good job. I know some of the stuff that you've had to deal with is not easy, but know that we are here supporting you guys from home. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Weed, please unmute your microphone. Go ahead.
Well, everybody said it all, I guess. This afternoon, I had a virtual Zoom meeting with the SLRD, and it was a trial for 2 meetings on Wednesday. And I will say that I prefer the way we're set up to the Zoom, but I'm sure I'll get used to it. And I'd also like to say, although I've been taking the COVID really seriously, it's kind of directly come into my family now. So, or indirectly, I guess. One of my daughter's significant others was working in the oil field camp in northern Alberta, the Imperial one, and he works for Finning. So being diverted to a different site, but he is in quarantine right now for 14 days because they've had so many people test positive. So once it really affects your family and you put a face to it, it's really a whole lot scarier than all the news things. So everybody, if I've been a little overwhelmed or a little anxious, now you know why. Thank you to everybody for the good job they're doing. And I'm really looking forward to Jeremy's suggestion that when this is all over, we have a huge party and sit uncomfortably close to one another. That is it.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Mayor, may I go directly to the CAO report? CAO, please unmute.
Thank you. So I've got 4 items to speak of. First one is a huge shout out and thank you to all the staff and volunteers who've been working in our Emergency Operations Center. They're doing a fantastic job. They're working every day of the week. They all claim on their timesheets that they're working 7 to 8 hours a day, but based on the emails and messaging, I know they're working probably 16 hours a day. So just a big thank you to all of them, and I hope they get to come to our uncomfortably close party. They all deserve it. When this is all over. I'd like to say a reminder to the public and to council as well, so tell all your friends and family. We are looking for applicants for the Water Advisory Committee. There is a notice for that on the Lillooet website under news items, under news and announcements. And you'll see all the information there. You can email in your interest in the application forms and the terms of reference for the Water Advisory Committee. So we'll be collecting those until May 7th. So we do encourage everyone to apply. Staff will then review the applicants and provide recommendations for council's final decision on those applicants. And if we don't have enough by May 7th, we'll just keep advertising. So that is the Water Advisory Committee on our website. Another one is economic development. Can't really talk too much about economic development until we talk about economic recovery, but those two things are related. So staff have been working with our grant writer, Lori Reimer. She is actively working with stakeholders in the community and with the district to get in an application by the end of this month to get a dedicated contractor to help the district, businesses, and community to recover from what we're going through right now economically and plan out both recovery and a rebound, hopefully into positive economic development into next year. So that application is due the end of April, and we're really hoping that NDIT will make a decision on that quite quickly. Hopefully, I'm guessing middle of May. I'll be calling them every day, and we hope that goes well. But if we get that, it will allow us to have a dedicated body working with Tourism Lillooet, Chamber of Commerce, and other business groups to get us up and running now as best we can, maybe just with online services and outreach to the community to realize how much they can do right here in town without having to go to Amazon. And then when we're opening back up to tourism, how we can leverage our assets to bring people into town without necessarily all standing within 2 meters of each other. So more on that as we hear. Got a question? Councillor Wiebe?
Councillor Wiebe, go ahead and unmute.
Yes, I don't know if this is an appropriate question or not. I know that our last meeting, we talked about economic recovery and a few things. I did not know that we were writing a grant for someone to help us with our economic development and to work with these other groups. And somebody asked me about this today. So I'm feeling a little blindsided by hearing it at the moment. If somebody could fill me in, did I miss something, or was somebody else speaking out of turn before it got here?
Yes, it was mentioned very briefly at the last meeting that we had, the last regular council meeting. So I'm not sure if maybe you just missed it. It was an idea at the time to do the application for it, and then spoke with the grant writer and the chamber and decided to go for it because it's an opportunity with a tight timeline. NDIT actually reached out to local governments suggesting that we apply for this. So if there's any particular stakeholder in the community who's interested in this position, I'd love to hear from them. We're gathering information right now from local businesses and the community as to ideas they have for what this position can do. But a large part of this position, if it occurs, if it gets granted, is to come up with the plan. So their first job and the first while that they start is to talk to all the stakeholders and get an idea of where they can have the biggest impact the quickest. So, but it was theoretical at the last meeting. It has become real. I hope that answers that question. And the final thing I'd like to note is that the province did make a number of announcements last, I think it was Thursday, measures to help out local governments. But as many of us are realizing in local governments, they're not on par with what the federal and provincial governments have been doing for individuals and small businesses and nonprofits. For example, the 75% wage subsidy is not available to local governments. All of the measures to help us with our cash flow ultimately either cost us more later or undermine our ability to fund things in the future. So if we're borrowing from our capital reserves, that's undermining our reserves, and we need to top those up in the future. So what we're losing now in revenue, we need to try to either make up for in the future or cut back services. And in my conversations last week with some provincial agencies, some of this was actually news to them. That there seems to be a huge disconnect between some of the agencies that we're working with right now through this COVID pandemic, that they actually thought that local governments had either the same means as provincial government or the same access to funding as private businesses and nonprofits. So I got a little bit irate on Friday and I ranted. And apparently my rantings have made it up through Civic Info BC and through the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. And I will be continuing those conversations and fighting for local governments. We need to be able to have equal footing with other levels of government and other organizations. We're all in this together. We have similar challenges with cash flow, but for some reason, other levels of government seem to think that it's acceptable that local governments continue increasing taxes by 3-4% this year because they've helped out small businesses or because they've helped out individuals. But that's not realistic and it's not empathetic. So I'm going to continue fighting that fight, and I'm going to be talking to the mayor tomorrow about how we can bring this to the ministers' meeting this Thursday. There are many other small communities and even large communities. There was a news story today from the mayor of Vancouver trying to get this point across to the provincial government that we are losing revenue right now. Week by week, we're already losing revenue, and their cash flow solutions aren't actually helping that much. You're seeing layoffs at the level of 25% of municipal staff, which only creates more jobless and more suffering. So I just wanted to make that statement.
Councillor Weeb, was that a question or a thumbs up? CAO, Councillor Weeb gives you a thumbs up.
Fantastic. And that is my report and my rant for the day. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, do you have something to add, or should we move to 13.1?
Thank you, Mr. Deniger, for your diligence, and staff also for keeping us whole to this point. And I think if staff and council conserve cash flow, we will get through this. And I like the approach that staff takes in terms of protecting our present reserves and our surpluses. And that Mr. Deniger, I think, is all the CAOs did wake up the province side in Victoria. We'll see where that takes us. Thank you. We'll go to item 13, new business. 13.1, discussion on continuation of the OCP amid budget concerns and perception of engagement. So I'll let staff talk to this, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was something that we addressed a little bit earlier when we were talking about what projects we were going to redline and not spend money on. This was one of the projects from the planning side that I indicated could be pushed back to later in the year. However, it is a larger project that is going to affect how the community develops moving forward, including the economic recovery of the current situation that we're coming out of. So I did want some explicit direction from council about whether they were comfortable in deferring this project for a period of time, not striking it from the budget. This does need to happen, but just waiting until we're secure in what our cash flow and our revenue is going to be for the year. Also, as we've seen, and not just our video chat, but many others, is not everyone has the same level of internet service. So if we are relying on electronic means of participation, we may actually be losing out on other members of the community who just simply don't have the appropriate access. And the messages coming from the federal and the provincial government is that while we're doing a good job, this isn't over yet. And I do want the community's mind to be on the future and on the official community plan outside of the lens of the fear of this virus. So it pains me to say that it's probably appropriate to defer this through the summer and reassess in August or September when we have a better idea of where we're going. But if council does wish to continue, I know that Modus Consulting is still more than willing to carry on with their electronic engagement. So I'll pass it over to council if anyone has any comments. Councillor Weeb, please unmute your microphone. Go ahead.
I think it's important, but on that note of importance, I am quite comfortable with deferring it until we know exactly what kind of a situation we're coming into or getting out of. So I am quite comfortable with deferring it, but leaving it in the budget.
Anyone else from council have a comment on this? Councillor Leach, please unmute. Go ahead.
So it would pain me to defer this because we've been waiting so long for it, but I do understand, and if revisiting it in the fall is where everyone wants to go, I can be okay with that, and just as long as we revisit it at some point, because it's really vital that this gets done. So that's all.
Thank you, Councillor. One thing I did forget to mention is that one small benefit of deferring is that it will tie in a little closer to whether we know if we've received grant funding for the housing needs assessment. And those are two things that would work very well in concert together. So it may not be as big of a loss to just defer by a few months if we can get those two things done at the same time. Any other questions from council? Thank you. I will take that as direction to continue to hold off until August or September, and I will bring back another discussion item at that time to see if it's appropriate to resume work on the OCP. Mr. Mayor, if you would please unmute your microphone.
Okay. Staff, thank you, council. Am I live?
Yes, you are.
Am I live? Yes, apparently
Yes,
I am, but it doesn't show in this.
Go ahead.
Wise move on staff, wise move. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Leach. It's something we very much look forward to. I just want to throw my 2 cents worth in, waiting for the initiation and completion of our OCP. We should be prepared as a staff and a council to make whatever variances we need to with our OCP in order to assure that we get some development up and running. As Councillor Leach has met from the webinar that she had attended some time back, that some of these issues we can be of help by looking at how we can enhance local investment and subdivisions whereby we can achieve revenue sooner, maybe not so much this year, but next year and the year after. I do believe strongly that face-to-face requirement for something as important as the OCP is definitely there. As for staff's notification, I've asked the councillors to each come to me with some of their good ideas, and a few of them have already, and there's some good ideas in which I can sit down with our CAO when we can achieve the end, which is not too close by, and assure that as well as the red circles that Steph has done, that council is inputting some good ideas. We'll review that with the CAO, and when the CAO and myself and it checks it out with staff, we'll come back to council with more that we feel we can contribute to assist with the economic recovery of our community. So thanks very much. We'll go to item 13.2 and New Hazelton UBCM resolution for BC Gaming Grant. Councillor Huffel, will you please initiate before we table? Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor.
So can I just ask my question, or do I have to read something out?
Councillor Hoffel, I believe he was asking for clarification on the reason for the agenda item being moved to this section.
Oh, okay, I just wanted to ask Ms. LaRue a question about it.
Go ahead.
All right, so my question is that this letter from Hazelton is just wanting us to support the recommendation that communities under 10,000 in BC should be considered to be eligible to apply for the Community Gaming Grants Program. But I know that that has come up multiple times in the past, and I'm just wondering, through the mayor to Ms. LaRue, have we ever applied for anything for the gaming grants, and have we ever received anything?
Go ahead, CFO.
Through the mayor, as far as I'm aware, we have not ever applied. The reason being we're not eligible. My understanding from this letter is that the Village of Hazelton wants to basically plead to the government that communities under 10,000 population, as we are, could be eligible to apply for this. As far as I'm aware, we never have, because we aren't eligible at this time.
Okay, well, I understand that we're not, I just thought that in the past we've sent letters somewhere asking for this to happen for us. So that's all I needed was some clarification. Thank you.
Go ahead, CFO.
Through the mayor, I believe that it was the previous mayor had been in discussions, whether it was at UBCM or letters to the province, basically along the same lines of trying to convince them to allow us to be eligible, but I don't believe that it ever came to fruition.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if you could please unmute your microphone. Go ahead.
Thank you. I take it that it's work and this thing that we undertake in terms of supporting when UBCM comes up, and maybe and staff can arm us with and that we are on the floor to support Hazelton to record the one who's the best gambler amongst council is to be the one that gets up to present.
Sorry.
Not much humor in this crowd.
No, sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Your video is becoming increasingly distorted at the moment. Might I recommend that we make a motion to accept this item for information, and then we'll hammer out the particulars when we have a better connection.
Okay, but we will hammer up. Who will so move?
Councillor Hopful.
And second?
Councillor Howe.
Call the question. Those in favor? Carry. No, those opposed? Sorry.
Motion carries.
Motion.
Mr. Mayor, before we move on to thank you. Before we move on to 14,
I've got your message.
I have a request from the CFO. She still needs a piece of clarification. Go ahead, CFO.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I just want to canvass council more than anything to ensure, I did mention as one of my spiels that I was recommending that the due date for all classes of property taxes be moved to September 30th with penalties to be applied on October 1st, matching what the province has done for the industrial properties. I just want to canvass that council is agreeable to that, because I do have to start letting my printer know about property tax notices. I don't want to change it on them a bunch of times.
Does anyone from council take issue with the September 30th date? Everyone appears to be in consensus.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, please unmute your microphone.
We go on to item 14.1.
Yes.
I need a resolution that the meeting be open to questions from the media and public. Who will so move?
Councillor Weep.
And who seconds?
Councillor Howe.
Okay, I call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed?
Motion carries.
If any? Thank you. Mr. CEO, do we have any queries, questions
No,
Online?
Mr. Mayor, nothing has been submitted as part of this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Item 15, a look to adjournment. I need someone to move that the April 20th regular council meeting be adjourned. Who will so move?
Councillor Wiebe,
And second,
Councillor Leach.
and I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Thank you, staff. Thank you, council. Thank you for your patience and for your very important input. Appreciate it. See you all soon.